Hi, first grade.
Hello, first grade.
This is Mrs. Kunda,
And Mr. DeStefano.
and we are here with a brand new Listen and Learn lesson. Today, we're going to be learning about animals of the freshwater habitat.
Wow, I'm excited. This should be so interesting.
I know. As always, we want to welcome you and let you know how much we miss you, first grade. It is not the same teaching Listen and Learn without you.
Yeah, we miss seeing you on the floor with your hands raised, asking questions and answering our questions. But hopefully you'll be thinking at home and answering some of our questions at home with your families.
Exactly.
And I want to remind everybody that this unit is nonfiction. Remember, the word fiction means fake. So nonfiction means it's not fake, which means it's real. So nonfiction texts are about real topics. They teach, inform, and explain real things. We remember said many times, but not always, you'll find real photographs in nonfiction texts, but you will find some that do have drawings like we see on our picture on the right side as well. So just remember, nonfiction means it's real.
And we're going to see a lot of real pictures today during our story. They're really nice. All right, as always, we want to introduce some new vocabulary that you're going to be hearing throughout the story. The first word is kind of a hard word. Right up here, this is the word amphibious. So amphibious is to be able to live both on land and in water. So the sentence at the bottom says, our frog tank has areas of dry land and water for swimming because frogs are amphibious. So what that means is a frog is a type of animal that enjoys living on the land, but it also enjoys living in the water.
Our next word is float. Float means to stay or move slowly on top of the water without sinking. So if we look at the picture of the girl swimming, she's floating in the water. She's staying on top of the water. She's not sinking to the bottom. It was nice to float in the pool on her raft.
All right, and our next word is freshwater. So freshwater is water that is not salty. This is typically water that you would be drinking. Every summer, our family goes to the freshwater lake to fish.
And our last word is gills. Gills are the part of the body that fish and other underwater animals use to breathe. So if you look at the picture of the fish, you can see the fish's gills. That's how the fish takes in oxygen from the water. That's how they breathe. Human beings, we breathe with our lungs. Fish breathe with gills. So when we went to the aquarium, we saw the trout's large gills on the side of its body as it swam by.
All right, and as always, we have a journal response for you. And today we want you to listen very closely as we read, and we want you to pick one of our freshwater animals. So we're going to be learning about several different animals, and we want you to pick your very favorite. So once you've picked your animal, tell us, how does this animal adapt to live in a freshwater habitat? And at the bottom in red, we gave you 2 sentence starters. The first one says one animal is, and the second one says it adapts by. Now be mindful that if you have a different sentence starter that you would like to use, you can use that as well. These are just options for you.
Don't forget to take a picture of your work and send it to us. We love to see it. And sometimes kids draw pictures to go with their sentences too. So if you would like to draw a picture of your animal in the freshwater habitat, we would love to see that too.
Yeah, you guys are so creative. We love seeing your work. All right, first grade, before we start our lesson, we really wanted to show you this picture. This illustration shows the different kinds of freshwater habitats that we're going to be learning about today, such as rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds. We'll be seeing these throughout our lesson today.
All right, hello again. Glad you can join me. I thought that we needed a real change, so I've come off dry land to a place where it's wet all the time, a lake. A lake is an area with water that is surrounded by land, so it has land all around it. There is a lot of water in the world. In fact, water covers most of the Earth's surface. So is the Earth made out of water or land more? So the Earth is made more out of water. There's more water on Earth. But only a tiny part of the world's water is fresh water, the kind of water you and I can drink because it has very little salt in it. So is most of the water in the world fresh water, the kind of water we drink? No, according to the text, most of the water on Earth is salt water. But the fresh water is the water that we need. It's the water that we drink. So when you go to get a drink of water from your sink at your house, you are drinking fresh water.
All right, speaking of fresh water is found in streams, rivers, lakes, and ponds. The water in these streams, rivers, lakes, and ponds comes from rain and melting ice and snow. Isn't it amazing to think that the water from the drinking fountain at school or from the faucets in your house all comes from rain? Wow.
It's very interesting. I'm here at the water's edge to explore this lake and the plants and animals that call this freshwater habitat home. Freshwater habitats have many kinds of fish, birds, insects, and other animals. Standing here, I can see an enormous leaf in the water. Let me climb onto it so we can get a closer look. This is a water lily leaf. A water lily is a plant that lives in water near the edges of ponds and lakes. Plants are important in freshwater habitats because they make oxygen for animals to breathe. Plants are also food for the animals to eat, and they can provide shelter to protect animals from their predators. The leaves of the water lily are very large, round, and green, and they float on the surface of the water. So there's our word float. It means they stay on top of the water. They don't sink down into the water. And we learned that the water lily is a plant that we find in fresh water like ponds and lakes. We learned that they're important because they make oxygen for animals and also for people to breathe. And plants are food for animals to eat. And they provide shelter to protect animals from their predators.
And I do think it's always important for us to understand that even the fish that live in the water, even though that it's hard to think of them needing oxygen because, when we think about them, swimming in the water, they don't have to come up for air. But there's actually oxygen in the water that the fish take in through their gills. So it's very important that these water lilies produce that oxygen so the fish can breathe in the water. And at the very bottom, if you take a look, there's a little turtle at the bottom. I don't know if anyone noticed him, but he is down there and it's very cute.
It's kind of camouflaged in those water lilies.
He really is. What a wonderful adaptation. All right. The water lily is well adapted for living in this habitat. Like the kapok trees in the rainforest, the lily's large leaves let it get as much sunlight as it needs for food and energy. Lilies are also food for many animals. Believe it or not, animals like deer, porcupines, beavers, and turtles all eat the leaves, whereas ducks and geese like to eat the roots. Some animals, like fish and frogs, use the lily leaves as hiding places, and the flowers bring bees and other insects. I'm going to float around the edge of the lake on this water lily leaf, but I'm going to have to leave soon because this pesky turtle will not leave my leaf alone. Wow, so it sounds like those lilies are very important for this habitat. I mean, animals use them as food, they use them as protection. It just sounds like they're pretty important.
I've pushed out from the edge of the lake a little, and already I can see another kind of plant that lives here. It's called a cattail, and it gets its name from the unusual way it looks. Thankfully for me, it doesn't have much to do with real cats. Cattails have long, thin stems with foot-long, furry flower spikes at the top that turn from green in the early summer to brown in the fall. The flower spike feels soft and furry and looks a little like a cat's tail, but I think it looks more like a hot dog. The plants can reach up to 9 feet in height, which lets them get as much sunlight as they need. So that's one adaptation the plant has is that it grows so tall so it can get the sunlight it needs. As with water lilies, some animals use cattails for food and shelter. Muskrats and geese like to eat the roots of the cattail, and the juicy green shoots are a favorite of moose and elk. Many kinds of birds make their homes among the cattails. It's very hard to see anything in there because cattails grow so thickly. So it's a good place for birds to build their nests and to lay and hatch their eggs. Predators like snakes and frogs also live among the cattails and search for animals like birds and insects for food. I think I'm going to move on now. As you know, I'm not very good with snakes.
All right. Come with me beneath the water and let's take a look at what's under there. Here are some nice looking rainbow trout. Fish can only live in water and they breathe underwater using gills on the sides of their bodies. Gills take in oxygen from the water around them. Fish have strong tails that they use for swimming and fins that they use for steering and balance. Wow, those sound like, a few adaptations right there. They have those gills so that they can breathe. They have strong tails so that they can move around. And they have those fins for steering and balance. The rainbow trout is a carnivore. So this means that it eats other water animals like insects, other fish, and sometimes shellfish. It even eats some small land animals like mice if it gets the chance. So I'm sure it wouldn't mind a nibble of a rat. Rainbow trout like to live in rivers, but some prefer the deeper water of the big lakes.
I enjoyed exploring beneath the surface of the water, and now I'm going to rest on a lily pad again. While I'm drying off a bit, let me show you a kind of frog called a bullfrog that I can see sitting at the water's edge. Frogs are amphibious. What does that mean, amphibious? That's one of our words. That means they can live both in the water and on land. Bullfrogs are the largest kind of frog found in North America, and they can grow more than half a foot long and weigh more than a pound. That's a really big frog. The bullfrog gets its name from the loud cow-like noises it makes. I bet birds and turtles would be pretty surprised to know that a frog can make such a loud sound. Pretty neat, huh? This bullfrog is resting now, but it will come out to hunt when it gets dark. Bullfrogs eat a lot of different kinds of food. They are carnivores, so that means they only eat other animals. So they eat small fish, snakes, birds, and insects, like this dragonfly that's buzzing about my head. So if this bullfrog comes out mostly at night, that must mean this bullfrog is a nocturnal animal. Remember, nocturnal animals only come out at night.
Yeah, you can remember with that N sound, nocturnal and night. All right, speaking of dragonflies, adult dragonflies are flying insects with long bodies and wings. Dragonflies live around lakes, streams, and other freshwater habitats because they lay their eggs in the water. Adult dragonflies eat other insects like mosquitoes, flies, and bees. The dragonfly uses its long wings to hover around in the air where it can catch its food. It has to be careful because the bullfrog isn't the only one that likes to eat dragonflies. Birds and turtles like to eat them too.
The water is getting a little rough out here. Ah, that's why. Here come some birds that like to eat insects. These are a kind of duck called mallards. Ducks are birds and can live both in and out of water. But it's the water where they spend most of their time. Like all birds, ducks, like these mallards, are covered in feathers. Did you know that ducks' feathers are waterproof? Oh, I think we're going to read about an adaptation. We better listen closely to this.
Yep, turn those ears on.
Ducks rub special oil from their tails all over their feathers. Because oil and water don't mix, the water drips right off the ducks without getting their feathers wet.
All right, ducks float on the surface of the water and have large webbed feet to help them to paddle. They dip their heads under the water and use their beaks, which are called bills, to search for food at the bottom of the lake. That's what our friend in this picture is doing. Mallards eat grasses and seeds from plants and small animals like insects, worms, snails, frogs, and small fish. Well, we've had a good look around this freshwater habitat, but I have to get off this lily leaf before these ducks knock me off. There's another kind of water habitat, and we're going to have a look at it next time. I hope you'll join me. Now, if you'll please excuse me, I have to start my long trip back to shore.
So Mrs. Kanda, before we go on, I wanted to just mention about your reading is that ducks have those webbed feet, which means there's kind of skin kind of in between their toes, and it helps them to be able to move the water when they swim.
Yeah, and they have those bills, those beaks that help them to catch their food from the bottom of the lakes. That's another adaptation as well. All right, let's see what you remember from our lesson, first grade.
Okay, Mrs. Kanda, what are some examples of freshwater habitats?
Well, we learned that some examples of freshwater habitats are rivers, streams, lakes, and ponds. Mr. Stefano, is most of the world's water freshwater or saltwater?
Most of the world's water is saltwater. So even though we need fresh water, most of the water on the earth is saltwater. Mrs. Kanda, what are some plants that live in freshwater habitats?
Well, some plants that live in the freshwater habitats would be water lilies or cattails. Mr. Stefano, what animals live in freshwater habitats?
Well, we learned about fish, like we saw the rainbow trout. There are birds like ducks. There's insects like the dragonflies we saw, bees, mosquitoes, flies. There's frogs. We saw a bullfrog. There are deer and porcupines, beavers, turtles, muskrats, geese, and moose. So so our friends listening have lots of choices when they're thinking about animals that live in freshwater habitats and how they adapt.
They sure do. My goodness, that's a lot of animals.
Mrs. Kanda, how are dragonflies adapted to live in a freshwater habitat?
Well, some ways that they've adapted to live in this freshwater environment is they lay their eggs in the water. They eat insects that live in the freshwater habitats like mosquitoes, flies, and even bees. Mr. Stefano, what carnivores did you learn about today that live in freshwater habitats?
So carnivores are animals that eat other animals. So that would be the rainbow trout and the bullfrog.
What are some animals that are omnivores that you learned about today?
So omnivores eat other animals and they eat plants. So that was the mallard ducks.
And what is a nocturnal animal that lives in the freshwater habitat?
The bullfrog. And Mrs. Kanda, why are water lilies so important in freshwater habitats?
Well, water lilies are very important because they provide oxygen for animals to breathe and food for them to eat. The leaves are even hiding places for animals like fish and frogs, and the flowers attract bees and other insects. All right, first grade, that's the end of our lesson today. So we just want to cycle back to our journal response. We really want you to just take a minute and think about all of the information that we learned today and think about all of the animals that we talked about. Pick your favorite animal and then tell us, how does this animal adapt to live in a freshwater habitat? So we gave you some sentence starters at the bottom. The first one says, one animal is, and the second one says, it adapts by. So those are just some examples. You don't have to use them. You can use your own sentence starters, but we cannot wait to see your responses. As always, feel free to take a picture, send us your response in Dojo Messenger. You could even take a picture and upload it on Seesaw. We just love seeing your responses. Well, all right, first grade, that's all we have time for today. We miss you so much.
And thanks for listening, first grade. We'll see you next time.
Bye, first grade.
Bye, first grade.